So, hello and welcome to another dope conversation. I'm Latrice. I'm somewhere around 46-ish, you know. Currently, I'm a biology teacher. I have two amazing boys. I love nature and science. This year, one of my goals would be to try to start a not-for-profit. And what I bring to the conversation is I like looking at things from a scientific perspective, digging a little bit deeper than the norm, using logic and science to try to find understanding. But I'm also from the streets, so sometimes I got jokes.
Them
All
St.
right.
Louis streets at that.
Right, what street? When was the last time you've been from the streets?
I was just out in the streets yesterday, girl.
Oh, okay.
All right,
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Charlie. I'm 45 years old, and I am a career Navy officer. And in addition to that, I own my own commercial real estate investment company and also run a nonprofit that teaches families and students about financial literacy and entrepreneurship. I have one daughter and one grandson, and I love to read and I love running my businesses and helping other people. So that's the goal or the platform that I bring to Dope Conversations and Deliberately Dope is just that educating people about finances, financial literacy, and hopefully planting some seeds to help our community be the economic powerhouse that it is capable of being. And I will continue to focus on that in 2021 and looking forward to seeing some great things happening through this platform and many other endeavors. I'm excited. Turn it over to you, Charmaine.
Hi, my name is Charmaine. I am a case manager with a child protective services agency in Georgia. I've been doing social services for approximately 15 years, and I love all things pop culture and hip hop, and finding a way to bridge that information and how it applies to us as a culture. So I look forward to writing about more stuff this year and survive COVID.
That's very somber.
Mm.
I know. Listen, I just read somewhere that in some states, 50% of the population have somehow been tested positive for, possibly been positive for COVID, and the fact that I still going homes and I take it very serious. I'm just glad that I haven't been adversely affected so far.
I am glad none of us have, actually.
All right.
All right. So this week's conversation that we're going to talk about is titled Don't Take It Personal. This is my post. I'm writing about hate this year, and it's been really interesting. It's a little bit heavy sometimes, and this is one of those situations where it got a little bit heavy for me. But before I get into actually like what I kind of the meaning and the scientific part of it, the beginning of it was, you know how I mentioned the fact that I'm from the streets, but sometimes, even the streets got a heart. Anyway, but no, like sometimes things kind of do hit you in your feelings. You know what I'm saying? But I wanted to think about how today it seems like a lot of people are really sensitive about a lot of different things. And like the whole idea of the cancel culture and just blocking out things that you don't agree with or getting rid of people who you don't agree with. And I just wanted to like get y'all's opinions about what you think contributes to that. And is there a way for us to kind of get away from that? Or is that something you think that is necessary right now? All right.
I think that even though we live in the information age and we have access to a lot of information, people deliberately limit themselves to very specific information that feeds their preconceived notions. I don't think that we're living in a time where people are open to being exposed to new ideas and trying to and see it as an avenue for growth. So I think people really embrace closed mindsets and and surround themselves with people who believe and think just like they do, and almost make people who don't believe and think the way they do as the enemy. And unfortunately, you see all of those dynamics come into play today, where it's not really even just political differences anymore. If you don't believe what I believe, then you are the enemy.
No, what I was thinking was, is this by choice or by design? Because we naturally have a proclivity to kind of stick to our own kind. We have a natural tendency to migrate to like-minded people. But with technology, like you said now, where it reads what you like and sends you that only. And it kind of
that's if you limit yourself to being exposed to information through social
media. And that's what I was going to say. I was like, but a lot of people, that's where a lot of people are right now. And so so we already have that tendency somewhat, but I think that the technology of only sending you things that you like keeps you in that bubble more. And so I think
I don't think that's by
if you live like
the platforms. Does the platforms have algorithms that are going to be tailored to the things that you consistently view and respond to? Absolutely. Absolutely. But as people, I mean, again, it's a deliberate choice that you're only going to certain platforms to receive your information. Or when you see something that we are not having a natural curiosity to even question it or say, oh, let me dig into that further to see if that's true or not true.
Right.
I mean, most logical people understand that everything you see and hear on social media may not be true, but people are accepting these things as fact, and they're not exploring their ability. You have access to so much information right at your fingertips. You're not taking
lazy
to find out more.
Everything in life, I won't say everything, most things in life try to take the path of least resistance. So the path of least resistance for people is right here. They already sent it to me. I mean, because like there's been times where Charmaine, me and her have a conversation about something, or my birthday is coming up, and they'll send her information about stuff I like because they know she my friend and she can buy it for me for my birthday. So,
right.
And so like it really intensifies intensifies the bubble that they put you in. I know it takes your own personal accountability to bring yourself out of that, but a lot of people won't do that.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. I think like as a minority, most of us don't have the ability to work. We work where we continue to be the minority in an environment where, either as women or as women of color, something that makes us a minority that forces us to exist in this world that's bigger than our circle and our bubble. And I think that's why I love my job, because I go into homes of people from different economic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and it's just interesting to hear the people's logic and how they choose to discipline their children. Some of it is culturally based, and some of it is just based off of what their childhood experience, how they were raised as children. Yeah. So if you choose to stay in a bubble and exist only on social media, I think you're going to limit yourself. But most of us don't have that ability.
But do I think that there was some grand design by the founders of social media companies to manipulate us to only existing in a certain bubble that just reinforces everything that we want to hear and see? No, but do I think there were second and third order effects that may not have been anticipated?
Right, like I don't think
technology. Yeah.
I don't think the plan was like, we're going to get them to all be mad at each other.
Right.
But are there entities that know how to manipulate social media platforms for that purpose? Absolutely.
Use social media more. I think the plan was to, they clicked on that one time, so they might like it 20 times.
Right.
But that's how they make their money and grow their platform and their influence.
I don't think the intent was to, but that's one of the things, and it kind of feeds into something I'm writing about now. But like, that's the thing. Like we have like, oh, well, I'm gonna do this, but we can't really see the downstream effects of how that plays out.
Right.
A lot of good intentions, like, oh, this will be more convenient for people to make life easier, to make life better. But oh, also it's going to cause people to be like this and do these things. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. But I think some of the political fomenting and stuff like that, I think those things were reinforced by multiple elements that I don't think most people largely understand. I think social media platforms have been manipulated by a lot of different people for their own purposes. And I mean, with everything, there is a positive and a negative aspect to most things. Most things aren't inherently all good. You could probably find a way to use most things for ill purposes if that's what you choose to do so.
Right.
And social media is the exact same way. And so you have to go into it with some level of awareness of how these platforms work and how they may be influencing you.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And you said something before about people only like skimming the surface and not digging any deeper. And this happens a lot nowadays. You see the heading and you just assume what the thing is about without actually reading it. You repost it and you put that information out there without even knowing what it's about. So there was this one book I was reading. It's called The Selfish Gene. And I thought it was amusing because this was an anniversary edition. So I was actually listening to it on audiobook on the road trip. But so it's the same thing, right? But it was the anniversary edition. And so there was commentary from the author in the forewords and in the footnotes and stuff where he talked about the reception of the original book and how people reacted to it. So the name of the book was Selfish Gene. And so immediately people assumed the book was about we were genetically designed to be selfish or whatever. And so they would write these long, diatribes about the book being terrible and unscientific and like all this stuff. But actually that wasn't even what the book was about at all. And if you had read it, it was just talking about how your DNA wants to get passed on. It wasn't saying that we as people have selfishness in our DNA. You see what I'm saying? And so, like, if you didn't read how do you write an entire review or critique of a book that you did not read, clearly?
You didn't read, but that was the premise of the book. But there probably is some truth to that as well. I think we're all naturally selfish, and we naturally have a tendency to want to pass our genes on.
Right, but that wasn't even the premise of the book at all.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but that wasn't the premise of the book. Right.
Oh,
right.
No.
Yes, so, that all the time. But that is a natural human tendency to skim information and make quick decisions. That used to be how we survived. Like you ain't got time to be analyzing a whole bunch of stuff if you're gonna survive. So it's a natural human tendency that you have to operate again with some level of awareness. Now, if you're writing a book review and you didn't read the book, well, that's something totally different.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
that's something totally different. But this is why words like bias and stuff like that, which typically has a very negative connotation, but we all have biases in how we process information and come to conclusions in those informations. Everybody perceives and filters information through their experiences. Everybody's biased to some point. And bias may not necessarily inherently be a bad thing, except for when it's bad. You got to be able to recognize that.
You have to be aware of your biases. I think biases are only dangerous one, if you're not aware of them and you take actions based on this subconscious bias, or you're aware of that bias and you allow that bias to direct your emotions and your actions. But having a bias in and of itself is very natural, and there's nothing really wrong with it.
But I'm just saying, we use words in a way that that will, some words just have negative connotations, and the way that certain words have been used in recent contexts. If you say you're biased, that's negative.
Right.
That's the same thing as saying you're racist or you're prejudiced. Which
it is. That's why people take it nowadays. And so, but one thing I will say is I've been really interested and I would like to know y'all's thoughts on like with our understanding of the fact that we do have biases, and this can inform a lot of things you do with your life. Like if you have a bias, it can prevent you from reaching out or talking to people from different cultures or engaging in different ways. And one of the things that I find is, how difficult is it for you to objectively read information from somebody you disagree with? To just put your bias, it's really hard putting your biases aside.
Right.
Completely. Just saying, I'm gonna look at this information for what it is.
I don't know when I read things, I don't even go into it where I'm gonna just objectively, because it's hard to put your views and your experiences aside, but I am open to other people's opinions. And then after I read it, I either say, okay, there's something in there that I learned that maybe worth further exploring, or I read that and I don't agree with that. That's some BS, but it's I know that opinion is out there. So I'm not operating in a level of ignorance in what views are out here in this world. So I don't, and everybody's different, but for me, somebody who's naturally curious, who naturally wants to understand other views and other opinions, but exposing myself to, I think you're only threatened by other views and other opinions if you think that that's going to change your view or your opinion in a way that's not true to you. But I can be around other people who have totally different views, and it's okay. You don't have to have the same view as me. Right. That's not going to change me in any kind of way. But at the same time, be open enough to know that my view, just because that's the way I think and view things right now, once I'm exposed to something that makes sense, that I weighed information, then maybe I do need to change my view and opinion on it. Right. And so so I think you just have to be open and aware and know what your truth is, and go from there.
And so I came to this because I was I be listening to books and reading books, and so I was I had read The Origin of Species by Darwin, of course, and I had over the years read pieces of it, done work on it in classes and all this stuff, but I never actually read the full book. And so I sat down and I read the full book, and it was a couple, maybe a word or two here and there I thought was a little off, but for the most part, I thought Origin of Species was pretty solid, pretty good. He didn't fully understand everything that we understand now, but the principles and the core of evolution and natural selection were laid out really nicely in that book. And so me, when I get like energized and I'm reading something and I'm like, oh, this is so great, I'm going to read the next book he wrote. So I get The Descent of Man, an audiobook, and he took a hard turn with some of his assumptions that he was, it's one thing for you to report what you saw and try to make us, okay, I think if you can see the relation between these things, but then to make really broad assumptions about human behavior and mental capacities just based off things you can see on the surface through the lens of your upbringing and social structure. Yeah. So basically, throughout The Descent of Man, he kept referencing savages and the savage races, and basically that they were just a step above wild animals, the apes and all this other stuff. But Black people weren't the worst. Apparently the people in the Philippines, for some reason, were worse. I don't know. But he had it all mapped out, and even when it came to women, his idea was that women were less evolved than men. And this was due to sexual selection, because women have all the power in sexual selection, and therefore they didn't have to evolve, kind of like what you see in the peacock. Right. And the male and female peacock, because the peacocks have to keep getting bigger and brighter feathers to attract women, and the women don't have to do that because that's not what the men are choosing for. But the problem with that scenario is humans exist outside of those environmental things.
Yeah, but I think, just like you have a science background and I have a science background, I think, and if you even look at, so Charles, you're talking about 1800s, like he existed during slavery time and stuff like that. Yeah. And it is hard to to view things without the backdrop of what your cultural and social especially when you're examining societies and people, without biasing it toward what you were exposed to, what your understanding of cultural and social norms were.
Right.
And
right.
so and I mean, you look at a lot of the science in those days, most science reflected those type of views and those mindsets, and it's very hard to disconnect your social and cultural norms of the day and totally disconnected. So I don't think that that's totally out in left field. It is what it is. I mean, women were treated as second-class citizens in most societies of that day, and it just was as well as most minorities. I mean, it is what it is, and I'm glad we've evolved from that. Come on in.
I agree. And so like, but you know, for a second, when you read it, like sometimes it might make you take a step back and be like, And so that's what I'm saying. Like a lot of people, I think, would struggle with reading some things that and while I didn't agree with a lot of the stuff in Descent of Man, I still thought there's a lot of value in some of the scientific things that he actually taught.
Right.
Yeah, that's because a lot of the things that was talked, and like you probably agree with a lot of stuff in Origin of the Species, because none of that stuff really directly related to you. Like you talking about like he generically talked about the evolution.
When he talked about birds,
right, and species. So it was a little bit more agnostic to you. Yeah. Then when he went to his other book, and now he talking about women, he talking about me, and he talking about minorities. You like, wait a minute, that's me. I mean, so it's hard to, if you're a woman or a minority, it would probably, most women and minority today, when you read things from back then in the dominating perspective, because most people that look like us wasn't right. That's not what was published and put out there. You have very limited viewpoints that have been published and put out there that represents what the thought was on those topics. And I mean, you know, history is not necessarily accurate. It's accurate based on the fact of the lens through the people who are reinterpreting that history and that perspective. And I just think you just have to be mindful of that. And I think that again, that's why it's important today to make sure that there are multiple perspectives that are put out there, and what is published and what's going to be recounted for the history today. I think people will just have a lot more perspectives that will shape opinions on today's society and cultures.
I agree. Right. So like while I was reading, I remember the quote I had read in this book, The Four Agreements.
I love that book.
I love this book. It's really good. And it reminded me of that. And there was a quote that I used in my post this week. It says, whatever happens around you, don't take it personally. You take it personally because you agree with whatever was said. Nothing other people do is because of you. It's because of themselves. All people live in their own dream and their own mind. They're in a completely different world from the one you live in. And so then I took that and I was like, okay, Darwin was from England. He was white. He grew up in a wealthy family. He, went to these schools, went off in the world and looked at it through the lens of what he knew and the thoughts and ideas of the day. And so that had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with him. And I can see why, Not
only that, I mean, there's some things that still exist, but I mean, ain't nobody walking around talking about Charles Darwin on a large scale today. I mean, you know who he is. I mean, yeah. But I mean, even today, though, I mean, there are more. Science is not static. Science is very dynamic and it's evolving all the time. And I think from a scientific perspective, I don't care what field of medicine you're in, most medical professionals today understand that there's
really
not one size. Yes.
Still to this day, they still believe that African Americans have a higher threshold of pain. We're still suffering.
A lot of people don't believe that. And I think that, but I think it's important, again, like I said, I think history and influences and these different things are based on the people who are telling these stories. And I think that
Right.
there are more and more other opinions that are being allowed to shape those fears.
Right.
It's not monolithic anymore. It's not just based
I agree with that. And like a lot of stuff y'all talking about kind of touches on some of my coming up posts.
Right.
And it's really interesting to look. And so I kind of did this in a couple of the posts I've written, where I went all the way back to like as far as I could go to find some of the original ideas on the topic, and then I look now to see how far how it's progressed. And what I will say is, for some things in science, it may not look the same on the surface. It may have a different name or a different package, but I feel like there is always a subgroup or something in there that still holds those same ideas, just washed through the lens of modern language. You know?
Absolutely.
And so while it may not be the mainstream, and I think that, and even with that, I think sometimes the majority of scientists do some of those things a disservice by blocking things completely. Like if you just say, okay, this is bad, that was when we were doing bad things, we're just gonna block that out and pretend like it never. And so we're gonna completely ignore that. No, none of that science is valid. This isn't we're never gonna talk about it. Let it go. Don't ever bring it up again. And so then you have people who just kind of slip it in on the slide, little pieces by little pieces. And I'm not getting into it too deep because, like I said, I'm writing about some of that as well now. But one of the things that I did say, like that about whole not taking things personal sounds really, really good. It makes memes. It sounds like the ideal. But in reality, sometimes the reality versus the meme don't align. Because it is really easy to say, okay, I'm not going to take this personal because it was in the book. When somebody is in your face or somebody you work with, it's still like, because one of my, I was talking with my guy, and he was like, what you mean don't take it personal? If somebody's saying something to me, they talking to me. Right. I was like, but it's still really about what they think about you and not about what you actually are.
Yeah. I think that is a very mature perspective. I mean, anytime you're dealing with people, you have to understand that sometimes, even though the reaction, you may have triggered something in the reaction, or you may not have triggered something. They just was having a bad day, but you're feeling their reaction. You have to realize that sometimes some of that behavior or whatever it is that you're witnessing has absolutely nothing to do with you.
It has absolutely nothing to do with you.
And if you can take a step back and have that more mature perspective, you may be able to help somebody grow, or at least not escalate a situation.
Right.
But when you make it about you, you, then a lot of times it escalates the situation.
I think that's almost one of my superpowers, is that I make my job, because I don't come in because you did everything right as a parent. Usually if I'm in your home, someone perceives something that you did as a threat to your child. So I'm coming in and I understand that that parent or that guardian or primary caretaker is going to be on the defensive. So knowing just that, my job is to know that anything that is said or done up to this point has absolutely nothing to do with me. And I wish that officers and people that work with public, whether it's customer service or whenever you're working with the public, you have to understand that you are standing there almost as a blank slate as an entity, and that anything that's being said or thrown at you isn't about you, because this person doesn't know you. And so I've been called all kinds of black bees. I've been called everything up under the book. But reason why it doesn't hurt me, I am a black person. I'm a big black person, and you can point that out. But you're saying what does that have to do with why I'm here? And so it's my job to say, okay, my insecurities or insecurities I might bring has nothing to do with this moment at hand, and let's deal with you. Are you done? And I understand, and keep addressing the fact that that person might be upset, and normalize the situation until you can de-escalate what, so we can deal with the matter at hand. And that goes, and I think because I'm that way, it helps me be a little bit insensitive to, I don't really hear the threats or anything. But when it comes to one-on-one critiques, I can be a little bit more sensitive, because now I know you dug into my work or my writings or my case management, my documentation, whatever it is I'm being critiqued on. I know it's now personal. And so I think that we just have to understand that even in that critique, it's still someone else's perception of what's going on. And you still have the opportunity to fill it out and give it more, provide a more three-dimensional perspective of what they're reviewing, if you are allowed to have that type of dialogue.
And the one thing I like about this quote is that it says, like, you get angry because you agree. And when I read that the first time, I was like, that's kind of true. Because, like, if somebody says it and you totally don't agree with it, and you know that's not who you are, then what are you getting upset about?
No, I don't think so. Because there's been times, like me, you had that conversation when I was working at least 15-hour days. I was making sure all my documentation and work was put in. I was meeting all my timelines. I was going above and beyond. And our supervisor kind of put out something saying, well, you know, we're not seeing the effort. I totally disagreed with it because my reality conflicted with what was being said. So, or if you're working out and you're losing weight and you're working hard, and then some trainer comes along and is like, well, if you were to do this and you would do that, you would get better results, without knowing you. Sometimes you getting upset or having an emotional response is based off of what you know is to be true, and it's not showing through. So you might be responding to the fact that your efforts, you're putting 110% into something, and it's not showing. That person on the other end is not seeing that.
Right. And then
one of the things in the 4 agreements that in that same topic, there's another quote in there about not taking things personally. And it says, when you take everything personally, you make everything about you, and that's selfish. And taking things personally makes you prey to other people's agendas. And I believe that to be absolutely true. Like,
right. And you see
somebody else's perceptions of you hijack who you are and and what you know to be true about yourself, and you spending all your time and energy on that instead of walking in your truth.
Right, because in that moment, even the examples you gave, it was because the person has a different view of you than you know of yourself, and so it's that person's view somehow.
Yeah, but even in the examples she gave, those were blanket statements about multiple people, not just you. So they made some broad blanket statements. And in anything in a blanket statement, everybody is not going to fit in that.
Right.
So it was up to you to be like, well, that ain't true about me. But if you took it personally, you just fed into somebody else's agenda. They had an agenda for saying that, whatever it is. Right. It may not have been directed at you. They were maybe trying to motivate other people in office, but you just fed into something and dedicated a lot of energy to something that had nothing to do with you. Right.
But also, because if you have, that's when you're not at your best and you have fatigue and, work fatigue sets in, and you don't have that ability to filter through some information and realize, well, they couldn't have been talking about me, obviously. Yeah. But,
some people are in career fields where you're under constant critique. You're going to get constant critiques back. It may not all the time be good. So, everybody's not going to come to you with good information all the time, because guess what? Everybody ain't good all the time. Your work ain't good all the time. So you got to know when you receive information, is this something I need to receive and take on board? Is this something that is that I need to do that's essential to my personal growth and development? Or is this like, I understand what you're saying, but you know, I don't really
It was
see
hard
what
for me.
you're
It was
communicating.
hard for me to deal with like critiques too. Like when you get your review and like I would feel from my perspective, I'm doing this, that, and the other, la la la. And then the other person, well, you did this good, but X, Y, and Z. And it would be like, okay, it's really easy to accept the positive things that somebody says about you. And even if I don't get an attitude or anything like that, it still would bother me if there was anything negative. And it just took a while for me to say, okay, you know, this is what it is. And if I disagree, I don't have to get mad or be hurt. I can just explain why I disagree. Like, I understand from your perspective how it could be that way, but this is what it is from my perspective. And so then we can just have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
I am that's where I am now.
Natural, I mean, in relationships, ain't nobody
But
good.
that's where I am now. But I'm gonna tell you, back in the day when I would get a review and they would say something bad, I wouldn't say nothing. I would sit there, I'd be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then I would have a whole attitude. I'd be like, she don't like me. She don't like me. She got an attitude with me. She probably just mad because I'm cuter than her. You know, that's what everybody do at work. Like, she hating on me.
Yeah.
But that was when I was younger.
Our ability, I mean, it's a fine balance because there are a lot of people who have no ability to take in information that is critical for your growth and development and receive it on board and grow. I mean, that's very selfish, borderline narcissistic, right? What's the definition of narcissistic people? That you're not going to take any cues from other people, and that's in a response to your behavior, and you're still going to operate in a way that's very selfish and damaging. That's damaging to you. So it's a fine balance. Like, yeah, there's some things that you shouldn't take personal, but there are some things when you're getting feedback and criticism from people, however you want to determine that that's absolutely essential for you to operate in some level of awareness and receive on board so you can grow and develop.
You know, and I was talking to Charmaine the other day about a former coworker of mine, and she is an assistant principal at another school now. We worked together for a year. She was very, very hard. She was very hard, but her delivery and her expectations were very high, and her critiques were very like direct. But it never felt like an attack. So I think delivery is important too. It felt like you said, do you want to be better or do you want to continue to be this way? And that's why I told Charmaine, I say, I really truly felt like if I had worked under her for this entire time, I might be like a super supreme with a cape flying through the sky kind of teacher, because I just feel like just even in the conversation that I had with her just the other day, just the critiques and us having a back and forth between each other, it made me feel like I need to elevate a little bit. You know how like you have those people who can critique you and kind of call you on your stuff, but it makes you feel like I need to do better. And there are some people who critique you and it's like, you ain't crap. You know what I'm saying? I almost said, you know what I'm saying? And so like, I do think that there is a balance between, you know, people who are delivering information to not necessarily try to baby you, because Ashley don't baby or sugarcoat nothing. She just say it flat out. But it just seems like it doesn't come from a place of like aggression. She doesn't say it it just seems like, look, you need to get your stuff.
Yeah. But that's the way that you perceived it. She could have had that same delivery to someone else and they didn't perceive it that way. So I just think we have a natural tendency to get very defensive when you're receiving things other than you walk on water. And so it takes a mature person to however deliver, as long as it's not disrespectful. I mean, but however delivery comes, everybody's not going to be able to deliver things in a way that's suitable to you. Like they're not going to pass your standard for how things should be communicated to you if they're trying to tell you something that you don't like.
I know. All right, ladies. So with that, that's kind of the gist of my my post this week, was about pushing past things that make us uncomfortable. so that we do have the ability to get to information that is valuable. Because a lot of times, like you said at the beginning, if you just skimming the surface or you block out the things that you just happen to not like, you miss gaining knowledge and understanding perspectives. Knowing what ideas, beliefs, and biases are out there can be closed off to you if you just go ahead and say, well, I don't like this particular person, or I don't like that word he said, and it is offensive to me, so I'm just going to throw that whole thing away.
Right.
You have to, and when you are interested in gaining, you have to be open, like you said, to different ideas and thoughts and things like that. And I will give you guys opportunity to, you know, say a couple words on your thoughts about not taking things personal and the ability to build knowledge in that space.
I think I'm just going to end with this. I think for everyone, it's important for you to know your truth. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of us, we don't know who we are. And that allows us to fall prey to a lot of different things. So I think as we explore other people and other people's reactions and what they're doing, it only works when you understand who you are and what your truth is and what you stand for. And when you have a solid foundation that way, then it's easier to operate in a way where, nope, I'm not. I know who I am. That is not a reflection of who I am. I know who I am. I'm not going to take that person. That can't possibly be directed at me, because I know who I am. I know my truth. And so I just think in everything, which is harder today, it seems, because there's so much shaping who we are, that I think we're losing some things. And so my message to everyone is that understand your truth, understand who you are and what you stand for. And that will make your walk through this earth and dealing with people and all the foolishness around it a lot easier, because when you walking through the den with a bunch of fools, at least you know that you're not one of them.
Right.
Yes, I loved all of that.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. I think that's pretty much. I think that's it. I think if you see it,
this is a good platform, because I don't never hear that. Heard anything like
Thank you, ladies. It was a lovely time chatting with you, and it was nice, even though it was sciencey and Darwin-y, that we could really bring it back to something relevant to today.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.